Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard.
John, what's coming up on the show today?
Jim, today we're going to talk about two favorites that have produced very interesting news in the past week. That is Canalaska Uranium and Solitario Resources Corp.
Has gold's uptrend sparked new market interest in the resource juniors?
Now, last week, the big theme of the Kaiser Watch episode was news that the American smart money has been busily buying gold, physical gold, during the past 2 months, emptying the London Bullion Markets Association's vaults. The gold has been flowing from London to the United States, and to such degree that the normal 2 to 3 day delivery for when you request physical gold, it's now 4 to 8 weeks, and the LBMA is now scrambling to borrow gold from central banks so that it can maintain its liquidity role. And I saw this as this is a potential turning point in the perception of gold. And in fact, this week, gold made a new high of 28.71 in the London market. The KRO Gold Producer Index has continued to rise. Agnico Eagle hit a all-time high of $142 per share. But the GLD ETF, it's continuing to motor along with no change in volume, no significant change in the gold holdings. The retail audience still doesn't believe it, and we can see it in the favorites Vista Gold Corp and Westvault Mining, which last week I said, if you believe gold uptrend is real, you got to own these things now, because when the inflection happens, these will slingshot up 5 to 10 times in price. But that isn't really happening yet. The favorites index was up 7.4% as of February 6th. There's 22 companies in it. And what I am seeing is that favorites that have company-specific news, that's moving them. So Canalaska Uranium this week published the first of 5 holes of their winter drill program for the West McArthur Uranium project in the Athabasca Basin, and that pleased the market. And Solitario Resources Corp put out a news release with a fairly narrow gold intersection, which for the vast majority of people out there, this is meaningless. It doesn't mean anything, but it actually constitutes blockbuster news, and I've been telling my subscribers about it, and I'm going to be talking more about why this is so important later. But one of the things I did this week is my bottom fish collection, which is 107 companies, I decided I would create an index of them using the December 31st closing prices and backdating it all the way to January 2nd, 2024. And when I'd finished all this, I was quite surprised by the result. This index as of February 6th is up 19.8%, which is really interesting because that's diversified over 107 companies. The gold is up 8.7% this year so far, and the TSX Venture Index is up 7%. So this bottom fish collection, I think it's going to be a tremendous one, and I've been sort of going over it, looking like what's moving. And there's one anecdote that really struck me as kind of a change in attitude. It's clearly not widespread, but one of my bottom fish is a company called Trifecta Gold Corp. Last year they reorganized in April, did a rollback, and then acquired the Mount Hinton project from their parent shareholder, Strategic Metals. This is a project that's been around forever. It's at the eastern end of the Keno Hill camp. There have been these gold veins in the mountains that have been chased forever, and the company said, well, this is a potential setting for an intrusion-related gold system within the tombstone rocks of the Yukon, where the big discovery in the past few years has been Snowline Gold's 7.2 million ounce so far, and probably counting Valley project in southeastern Yukon within the Rogue Valley. And they were going to do something similar. And what they did in the sort of hillsides it didn't really move the needle much, but they did some geophysical work and discovered that, lo and behold, in the valley, which is all filled full of debris and stuff, and you can't see any bedrock, there is a geophysical anomaly that looks like it's an intrusive complex. And now the speculation is this something like what the AMARC on its Joy project found with the Aurora discovery, which also sat in a talus-covered valley? Or is it like a Snowlines valley deposit, which was really hidden in a valley beneath all kinds of other debris from the sides of the mountain, which would be why the previous explorers missed it? And the company, had immediately after raising $1.5 million at 15 cents last year, it below 10 cents. It was on the bottom fish collection at 13 cents. And last week, a strange thing happened. All of a sudden, this slumbering bottom fish, somebody was sweeping the market on the upside, cleaning out the bids. And it wasn't just one player. It was two different brokerage firms, not the kind that are these algo trader firms. And they ran it up into the 20s, and then it pulled back this week, and then it pushed up again. And there was even a 1.3 million share bid showing at one point. Clearly a frustrated buyer decided to just snowplow the bid, this large bid. They're hoping somebody would pound it. But the problem is there's only 30 million issued, 37 million fully diluted. So there isn't a huge amount of paper. And today it actually charged through 30 cents. Now, this is interesting. The algos are not touching this because they smell we're going to get our heads handed to ourselves. They can't drill the Mount Hinton GC geophysical target until, perhaps June or anything like that. There's no new information. But what we have here is a shift away from this, 90% glass, half glass empty mentality to, hey, glass half full. It's still selective. This is obviously a pair of deep-pocketed investors who see the potential. And when you do your sort of implied project valuation, this project, 100% owned, it has about a $12 million implied project value. And if you take the current price as fair value, then you're looking at something which, when it's actually delivered, would end up being worth $500 million. So we're looking at a story where the upside is from this current sort of 20 to 35 cent level, suddenly be a $5 plus stock. And after 3 years of absolute misery, it's refreshing to see that there are people out there who actually see potential for something good to come from an exploration junior. So my bottom fish collection index, it's a pretty sensitive measure. There's more resource juniors in it than in the TSX Venture Index, which is really kind of like geared towards companies that have managed to go up and are dominating the value trade. No, this is a true index of measuring sentiment, and it's up almost 20% for the year so far compared to the favorites, which is really a sort of a diverse collection covering very different topics and metal types and strategies. So I'm pretty pumped about this. And by the way, the Substack thing, I finally got it going. Kaiser Watch Substack. This episode, this general comment that I've done, it will be free on there, but the comments about this company-specific comments about Canalaska and Solitario, those you will need the paid subscription to be able to see those. But all the others, I'll have them posted by the time you see this one, and those will be free so that you can get caught up on all the favorite stories that I've introduced for 2025.
What did Canalaska Uranium show the market this week?
Well, Canalaska Uranium announced in mid-January that it had started a $12.5 million winter drill program at its West McArthur uranium project, which is in Saskatchewan's Athabasca Basin. Now, just a detour before I answer that question, they own 86% and it keeps creeping higher. And the reason it keeps creeping higher is that the minority partner, Chemical, declines to participate each year. So it will get diluted down until it reaches the 10%, where I believe it turns into a net profits interest. So some people out there are thinking, well, this was kind of a big thumbs down from Cameco. Cameco is the one who has the McArthur project, the mine that's nearby, the richest uranium deposit in the world. This project's only about 10 kilometers west of this. Why would they not participate? Well, the reason they ended up in this strange situation is they had optioned it in 2016 or something like that, and they had spent $5 million and reached 30%, and they had a choice of going to 60% by spending another $6.3 million over 3 years. And at the time, they decided, no, we're not going to do that. Why? Well, the uranium price was still $20 to $30 a pound, where it kind of looked hopeless. Kazakhstan continued to flood the world with uranium, and the results from the drilling they'd done in the C10 corridor, where they'd hoped to see repetition of what Cameco had found on their side of the border in the Fox Lake deposits, it had been kind of so-so. So Cameco said, yeah, no, we'll sit back. You can carry on if you wish, and Canalaska did. And it took almost 4 years, 2022 in the summer, when they, in the C10 South corridor, this is a parallel corridor that had never been drilled, they drilled into this, and they got lucky right away, and on a geophysical target, hit high-grade, basement-hosted mineralization in the Pike Zone. And last year, this all changed in a big way when they finally found where the unconformity was, and they found much higher and thicker mineralization. And this now looks like McArthur-style grade mineralization. Now, for those unfamiliar, what does this corridor and unconformity mean? Well, in the Athabasca Basin, there are these sort of north-south fault structures that cut through the whole basin and the basement, and at the unconformity, that's where the basement, the much older basement rocks and the sediments, the sandstone that filled the basin, it's where this structure cuts through there. At that interface, that's where, when the fluids, they like to come up these structures, and at that interface is where they like to form these rich so-called unconformity associated uranium deposits. And McArthur itself is there's a whole bunch of them, but the main one, it has an extraordinary resource of 1,062,000 tons of 16.46% uranium. That's one big major pod, and it's part of a set of string of pearls where there's more. But this contains 380 million pounds, and it's in a similar setting. And so now the dream is that Canalaska at the Pike Zone has something similar. And when they reported results for the five first holes. 4 of them had mineralization in them. The 5th one did not, because it overshot the corridor, because they said, there's these offset faults, which apparently are a good thing, because if this faulting occurred before the mineralization came, it creates extra complexity for the juices to flow in and around and drop their uranium payload. Now, they've got 3 rigs going there now. One of them, there's sort of 2 pods at the ends, like barbells at the end of a 100-meter segment of corridor. They've got one rig sort of working in the middle to stitch it together. They've got one rig at the eastern end to extend it in that direction, and one rig at the western end to extend it in that. And the expectation is that by the time this year is done, they will have stitched this pod together and have enough information to produce a resource estimate for this project. Now, the big news was that the whole 76-1 had 14.5 meters of 12.2% U3O8, and that included 5 meters of 34% U3O8. That's the highest grade they have yet seen in the Pike discovery. And hole 94.4 was a step out to the west, and these are small step outs. It was only 15 meters in the eastern direction. They had 4.9 meters of 3% U3O8. So this body is still growing a long strike, and we need to see what the middle also fleshes out as. And what we're hoping to eventually see, and you don't need huge volume, because the density of this uranium, high-grade uranium mineralization is like 5 or something like that. You don't need an awful lot of volume to come up with, say, the million tons of a McArthur clone. So the company has over $20 million in the treasury. They have 216 million shares fully diluted, and now 89 cents with an 86% interest. This represents $224 million implied value for the project on a 100% basis. Now, for the Kaiser Watch audience out there, a big question is, how high can the stock go, and where should it be right now? And there's two parts to this question. The first part is answered by doing what I call, quantifying the size of the prize. I call it doing an outcome visualization. So I look at this and I see we've got the same geological setting as McArthur. We've got grades that are in the similar range, not quite as continuous and consistent yet, but that there's still lots of time for that to happen. What if they discover a McArthur clone such as I just described with 1 million tons of 16%? What would that be worth if it was ready to go into production? So you do a standard discounted cash flow model. In 2016, Cameco had done everybody a favor by publishing a technical report in which it outlined the CapEx and OpEx for developing McArthur as a 200-ton per day underground mining processing facility. So we got the numbers, the cost numbers from that. I've boosted them 25%, and so I've run a simple life of mine DCF model on this, and the size of the prize that comes out using the current $69.38 per pound uranium, it's come off a bit from where it was last year. The number comes in at 5.7 billion Canadian, and that's almost $22. The number used to come out at about $30, but that's when Canalaska didn't have quite as high fully diluted, and that was also when the price of uranium was around $100. So this model will change according to the the price of the metal. Now so that's what the prize is worth if it becomes reality. But we're only at the discovery delineation stage. We don't yet see what should it be priced at now? And the market's saying $224 million. Well, this is where my rational speculation model comes in, and this is a way of assigning speculative value, fair speculative value range based on the stage of a project. And a mining, an exploration development project has 9 stages. The first 3 are grassroots, where you're trying to generate targets. The second stage is testing targets with a drill. And the third stage is when one of those targets delivers potential ore body grades and widths, and you start delineating the discovery. Now, from there on, you get into, once you've got your resource estimate, the next stages are all about no longer discovering the deposit. It's about discovering the costs of eventually mining this deposit, and things kind of get boring. But the certainty increases as you go to each stage. When you get the resource estimate, then you get the PEA, then PFS, then feasibility study, then permitting and construction and all that. So as you progress along this exploration development cycle, your imagination gets more and more limited, but your certainty about what you have continues to increase. At the discovery delineation stage, it really the certainty is only 5 to 10%. So right now, the pricing that the market's doing is actually fair speculative value for this $5.7 billion outcome. And what this means is that if they deliver something that looks like a McArthur clone, and they go to the next level, they've got the resource, you would see the steady increase in value. But what often happens with a discovery is S-curve, which is this peculiar irrational aspect of the market where when you still don't know what the limits of the discovery are, the market somehow magically ends up pricing it at what it eventually ends up being worth at the end of the day after it's plotted through all these other stages. This is why discovery exploration is so much more fun than just betting on higher metal prices and what the economic studies will do to the economics of a project. So this is the year where I think the stock's fairly priced for a McArthur clone type outcome. So this is why it's a favorite. It used to be good speculative value, but with the decrease in the uranium price and the increase in fully diluted, it's no longer undervalued. It's fairly valued. But when we start seeing results from this year's program start to show this thing is really starting to look like a McArthur clone, that's when I think you'll see the S-curve market action kick in, and that's where you'll see it blast through a buck, go into the $2 to $5 range, and start trading. And the wild card is still, this is only one pearl within the string. If there get other rigs going that start finding other pearls within this corridor, well, then that's when you really will get the S-curve action. And why was the market capable of being irrational and doing this S-curve type of stuff? Because when you don't know the limits of a discovery, nobody can say for sure what the limit will be. So it could end up being bigger, 5 times bigger than McArthur. So until you know it isn't, that window there during discovery delineation is where you can see insane trading going on. That's a good time to sell into it when you start seeing why it's being priced for the best case final outcome. That's when you say goodbye and take your profits.
What's so interesting about Solitario's half-meter gold intersection?
On February 6th, Solitario Resources Corp reported 3 more holes, number 8, 9, and 10 from the Golden Crest project in South Dakota. And one of these was extremely interesting. This was hole number 10, and I've managed to pull together from various sources a map which has all the names of the targets and also the platforms. And what was interesting about this, it was just 0.52 meters of 11.33 gram per ton gold, and this took place somewhere between 394 and 395 meter depth, and just above that was another sort of 0.43 meter interval within the Paleocambrian rocks of 2.45 grams, and the way he described it is like this is kind of like stuff from the lower basal conglomerate interval that had somehow been reworked and moved into the base of the Cambrian. Now, they call it a paleoplacer, and this is really important news because in the North Black Hills, there is the Homestake deposit with its 17 million ounces. It is 1.8 billion years ago and hosted in a banded iron formation system in the basement rocks. And then to the west is the younger 55 million year old tertiary age wharf system, which many more than a billion years late, 7 years later, another event happened in this area that created new deposits in the sedimentary layers that from about 540 million years ago had started to layer themselves on top. And in the North Hills, Black Hills, it's all been tectonically uplifted and moved around. So in the case of Homestake itself, it outcrops. And in the case of Wharf, the lower Deadwood Formation is still present. In the case of Golden Crest, we have even younger formations, the Mission Canyon at surface, that blanket this whole region to the south, which is a reason nobody ever really looked hard at this area and found anything. And the big speculative hypothesis that I've been contemplating is, what if this Golden Crest area in the South Black Hills is a mirror image of what happened in the North Black Hills? Now, an interesting aspect of the Homestake deposit itself is that in the 1.8 billion years when it formed, and about 540 million years when it ended up underwater and sedimentation buried it, it was subject to erosion traditional placer type erosion. So you get this outcropping deposit eroded away, very similar to, say, what you have in the California foothills when all those mother lode orogenic deposits outcropping get eroded away and get shed into the American River and dispersed in channels and stuff like that. And what happened there in the case of Homestake is when the area ended up coming underwater, you first initially all the gold that's in these channels, the erratic channels, and so it ends up being reworked by wave action and current, so it gets distributed more uniformly, and then when the sedimentation piles on, it consolidates it freezes it in place. Sometimes there's fluids that move through and introduce pyrite and stuff like that. And you can get these laterally extensive, they're almost two-dimensional deposits, and they call them paleoplacers to mean that they are ancient and that they have been hardened in place and they are like rock. And in the case of the paleoplacer surrounding the bedrock-hosted Homestake, they extracted about 11 million ounces from that during the early days, not just from the little open pit in the small footprint of the Homestake deposit and down the whole 1,500 meters of vertical extent of the Homestake system. They found in this flat, laterally quite dispersed paleoplacer 11 million ounces. So what Solitario appears to have found with hole 10 is that they have evidence of a paleoplacer deposit, and they can tell because the drill goes through the Cambrian sediments into this unusual thin bed of conglomerate and stuff, and then into the crystalline Proterozoic basement rocks, and of course there's no gold in there. There's no Homestake deposit there, but this tells them two things. One, they may have an underground paleoplacer deposit, and if it came from something similar to Homestake itself, it itself could be substantial. But the really important implication is that clearly this did not come from a younger, tertiary-aged hydrothermal event, such as in hole 8, which at Land's End target, where they entered the lower deadwood and found the mineralization there, and that constitutes a discovery. That means an event similar to what created Wharf is present, and it's within this 10, 12 kilometer long north-south deep-seated structural break. That's now, the whole thing is an exploration target. But now we have sort of indirect evidence that there is much older gold in the basement rocks that shed this paleoplacer. And I asked Chris Harrell, well, did you have some little nuggets in it or anything like that? He said, no, we couldn't see any gold, so it's reasonably well distributed. And he said, it's not something like the Witwatersrand, which is probably a precipitation event. I mean, that was huge, 3 billion ounces, of which 2 billion have been mined, along about 300 kilometer segments on the rim of a basement, about 0.5 meter to 2 meters, stretching 25 kilometers into the basin. No, this is nothing like this. He says this is probably more like we see in Ghana, where the orogenic Birimian greenstone hosted gold deposits were eroded away and created the Tarkwa deposit, which is a fairly uniform grade conglomerate hosted system that was shed by the older orogenic bedrock veins and that. So we may have something similar to here, but what I find truly blockbuster about this is evidence that there is older gold in the basement, which means that the kitchen was loaded with gold, and when the younger hydrothermal system came through, it may have possibly scavenged some of this older gold that's in the system and redeposited it into the various sedimentary horizon that are layered on top of it. And it's interesting, this hole is in the N platform, which is the buckboard flat. It's one of the more northern ones. And when I put all this stuff together, I realized the main area that they had permitted for, which was the Matchstick and the Whirlwind and so on, that area, the holes that they drilled in there were disappointing. Land's End is actually to the west. They can go in there and drill 3 more holes in that. There's the Ranger and the Red Quarry targets, L and M platforms. Those they are going to go to after they finish the 3 holes at Land's End to see where the deadwood mineralization goes and hopefully hits a mineralized structure that's cutting through there. That sort of north-south structure bends a bit towards the northeast, so they hope they can reach that. In the case of Buckhorn Flat, they can only drill 4 holes total from each flat platform. That's the U.S. Forest Service limit. So what they're going to try to do there is fan a series of holes to see in which direction this paleoplacer deposit goes and how it behaves away from this one lucky intersection that they had. And if they're lucky, they might even hit the basement source of this paleoplacer gold. So I think this development, the market, some people noticed it, most didn't. I think this really boosts the prospectivity. They can probably get 2 rigs in there starting in May, testing these various targets within the Golden Crest plan of operations. The big one is Ponderosa, which is to the southeast, and Chris Harrell's optimistic they'll get it in time for a summer season. If they do, then we'll see 3 rigs pounding away in this area, revealing the endowment that could rival that of the North Black Hills Homestake region.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been speaking with John Kaiser. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.